Alright guys, let's do a quick video breakdown of Dan Bongino on Fox News talking to a former Navy SEAL, because they're kind of half right, but in a lot of ways they're wrong, and in a very dangerous way. Anyways, hit it, Dan.
Listen, I can't stress this enough. Biden has got to get serious about the rising threat of a China and Russia alliance.
So what you're saying is the alliance that was created due to terrible U.S. foreign policy needs to be saved by someone who is absolutely terrible at U.S. foreign policy.
Kind of a new axis of evil. Meanwhile, for the first time...
Now, the original Axis powers did quite a lot of evil and horrible things, but the axis of evil that George Bush Jr. made up was just a marketing ploy for his foreign wars. There is no axis of evil, and there never was.
The Pentagon's defense budget could top $1 trillion next year, but what are we spending the money on?
Now, that's a good question, because the U.S. spends way more than Russia and China do on their militaries combined, and yet somehow they seem to be doing pretty well to intimidate Washington. How can this be? Perhaps not every dollar is going where it's supposed to.
Now, people at the highest levels of our intel community admit the threat from China and Russia is real.
Technically, yes, but that's in the same way that technically there could potentially be a threat from your neighbor because he happens to own guns. So he presents more of a threat than, say, a different neighbor who doesn't, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's coming to take your Chevrolet tomorrow.
With Russia and China, how do the military stack up? Well, China is the biggest military in terms of manpower, more than 2 million active duty troops. That's a lot.
Dan, I love your program, but are you so sure that World War III would be decided by raw manpower? Like guys with guns and all that, and not so much nuclear warheads? I don't know, man. I don't think that this depth chart matters that much.
Are we already in a new Cold War with this China-Russia symbiote?
Well, it seems like we've been in a new Cold War for a lot longer than media or our Defense Department establishment or politicians would lead us to believe.
Now, the Cold War happened because there were two great powers on the planet that had two competing political systems: communism and capitalism, or Western-style democracy, or whatever you want to call it. What is the actual cause of this new Cold War? Could we maybe get into the causes? So if we are in a new Cold War that's inherent and it cannot be ignored, it cannot be stopped, it's this natural state of things like the Cold War after World War II with these two great systems competing with each other, what's the competition about? What's the nature of this Cold War? Why does it have to be this way? Are we going to talk about that? Or are we just going to declare everyone we don't like to be our enemy? I guess we're going to do the latter.
However, they floated a balloon over most of the United States that, if it had a nuclear device beneath it, could have taken out our entire electrical grid, rendering portions of the country, sending them back to the Flintstones. I mean, this isn't even advanced technology. And
enough about this balloon. Do you even think about what you're saying here, man? If the United States is really having trouble defending against a balloon, well, then what about the hypersonic weaponry of Russia and China? If it was true that the United States can't defend against a balloon, and it's surrounded by these evil, barbaric enemies that want to destroy it, it'd already be destroyed, man. Trust me, things are way different than what they seem, and that balloon was a nothing burger.
But there's some other things out there as well. We have essentially become dependent upon our enemies for our own security. And we're talking about microchips, we're talking about precursor pharmaceutical drugs for our citizens and for our military, energy.
So here, I completely agree. The United States has a very huge population, a huge diverse territory. The United States, in theory, really shouldn't need anything from anyone to get by, and yet for some reason is becoming dependent on its enemies. But why do we have to package this? This is normal. For the United States to be independent of other people, good, bad, or indifferent, that's just normal. Why do we have to package things in this us versus them? They're the enemy. Can't we just call them the competition? Like sports competition? I mean, yeah, you want to beat, say, the New England Patriots the next season, but you don't want to see them die or risk killing yourself to kill them.
All of those things are just playing right into our enemy's hands, and they're all things that we can point to, those 4 or 5 things that we can solve.
Listen, my friend, Russia and China and the other civilizations on the planet are not the inherent enemies of the United States and the American people. unless you believe in world globalism, where the United States should dominate everyone to the last. Well, if you believe in that, then everyone who's against you is your enemy, and that's the overwhelming majority of humanity. Deal with it, pal. So anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video and you like the opinions coming out of my big fat mouth, then join up on my Telegram channel. That's Tim Kirby Hardcore on Telegram. Link, of course, in the description.